What is going on out there to all my WandaVision MCU fans, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with my last recap, breakdown, and review of Disney Plus WandaVision. We're talking episode 9, which was simply titled the series finale, and we have a lot to break down in this video. We're going to talk about my pros, my cons, fans' expectations versus what happens in the show, theories ruining the show for some people. We're going to break it all down. You know, what is going to happen next with Wanda as the Scarlet Witch? We know Vision's still out there. The kids are screaming for help. We're going to break it all down in this spoiler discussion, but before we dive into the details, as you can see on the screen now, make sure you all are following me on all my other social media accounts, which you can find those links in the description below. If you are new to the channel, welcome to this community. Consider subscribing to the channel, and while you all are at it, make sure you hit that notification bell. That way you can get the alert for when I drop new content. It would mean the world to me if you all can like and share this review. It helps out the channel a lot, but I also appreciate all the support. And in the comments below, I always make these videos like a live premiere, so if you're watching this live, how you doing this morning? Go ahead, let's have a discussion about this episode in the live chat. I'm going to be interacting with you all, and of course, if you're watching this on the replay, let's talk about the episode. Let's break it down together. Let me know what you thought about the finale, the show as a whole, the expectations, meaning the theories, meaning your personal expectations for the show. Let's discuss it all in the comments. Let's have a great discussion in the comments below. So before I dive into the recap, break it all down for you all, a couple things I want to say off bat. Number one, thank you for tuning in every single week, watching these breakdowns. I know they're 15 to 25 plus minutes, and you all stay there the entire time. You interact with the videos, you like them, you share them. So thank you so much. I can't thank you enough, because again, there is so much coverage for WandaVision these last couple months, and it's just means a lot to me that you all watch these videos. So thank you. But then also, we got a couple things to look forward to. This isn't the last discussion about WandaVision. Number one, tonight, March 5th at 8 p.m. Central Time, myself, Amanda, and Chris, who host the live WandaVision discussion that we have every single Saturday, will be joining me tonight, 8 p.m. to do a live watch party for the finale. We're going to break down the scenes, talk about them, and have a discussion with you all that tune in live. Again, that will be a live stream watch party tonight at 8 p.m. And then, of course, every single Saturday, one of the best things I've ever done on this channel, which is having these live discussions about WandaVision. And I have Amanda and Chris as my co-hosts, and we bring in some incredible guests every single week, and we're continuing that trend with this finale. We'll be having, joining us tomorrow, we'll have Tessa from Mama's Geekly, we're going to have Zach Pope, and we're also going to have Sharonda for Pay or Wait. So you're definitely going to want to tune in tomorrow, Saturday at 3 p.m. Central Time. We're going to have a great discussion. I hope to see you all there. So with that out of the way, let's just get into this episode, man. I'm going to, as I do every single week, I'm going to recap the episode, break it down, but also share my thoughts about the moments, the scenes, pros, cons, so on and so forth. So as we open up the episode, it immediately picks up after last week's episode, which was really nice that we just jump right into the action, which we'll talk about the action in this episode. We see Wanda hitting Agatha with her powers, and we see Agatha referring to her as, you know, you need to give me your powers. You're undeserving of this powers, as Agatha kind of hits Wanda back with those powers. And it's in this kind of opening sequence that we kind of learn again what Agatha wants with Wanda, right? That's been kind of the big question. Okay, she knows she's a Scarlet Witch, so what does that mean for Agatha? Well, going back to the commercial we got many weeks ago, the Yo Magic commercial, now kind of ties into what we're seeing in fruition, coming into fruition, right? We're seeing Agatha say to Wanda, I want to take your powers. You don't know how to control your powers. You don't know how to handle these powers that will consume you essentially, and you can unleash hell on Earth potentially, which hell, and we'll talk about hell and Mephisto and all that stuff a little bit later. But in exchange, you know, we see Agatha say to Wanda, if you give me your powers, I'll let you keep your world, keep this little fantasy world that you've created, which Wanda just immediately responds by throwing a car at her, and we see Agatha disappears, and in comes the White Vision, which is just a whole conversation within itself in regards to Paul Bettany yesterday on Good Morning America, making the big reveal, which again kind of pumped the expectations for this episode for me in regards to the big like Luke Skywalker moment was him being White Vision versus the Hex Vision, which, you know, we'll talk about it more tonight in the live stream, and we'll talk definitely about it tomorrow in the live stream. But it does kind of set an expectation, but that's not anyone's fault but our own, right? To kind of expect a Luke Skywalker, Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel, you know, what was other theories? Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield. We've had so many fun theories, and again, we're going to really dive into this tomorrow in regards to the live discussion. But the show has its narrative to tell, right? And it's not the show's fault that we created these theories, created these expectations. We have to learn how to tame ourselves. And again, we'll dive into that a little bit tomorrow. But nonetheless, we see in this moment White Vision coming to Wanda, rubbing her face, and Wanda, she's like, Vision, is it you? She's like genuinely like shocked that this is her vision. At least she thinks it's her vision. As he rubs her face, he squeezes her head and tells her, I was told that you were powerful. And if you all notice the voice, and this is just me just being, the Ultron theory that was going out there for a while. I thought I heard a little bit of Ultron, but no, it was just like his, they synthesize Paul Bettany's voice to be the Vision voice, Jarvis voice of sorts, but also more kind of robotic, which kind of is what the White Vision was in the comics. Less of the humanity side and more of a robot on a mission, or in this case, an android on a mission to take out Wanda. As we see, Monica sees all this going on. Monica is in the man cave of Pietro, which we'll talk about who his true identity is a little bit later, as we see this kind of brawl take place in regards to Vision versus Vision, Agatha versus Wanda. And then we cut to a scene, which even before we go to the scene, the action, right? The action was a bit underwhelming for me in regards to the show really never relied on action telling its narrative, and seeing all this kind of unmotivated anticlimactic action was it was the weakest element of this episode for me, and I'll talk about it a little bit later. But we're seeing them fighting. We cut to Wu and director Hayward as they exchange some words, and we see Wu is kind of getting the phone, unlocks himself from the handcuffs. And this is, to me, where the show again is a little bit not necessarily disappointing, but it's just kind of underwhelming, right? We see Hayward becoming the traditional villain. I've always said every single week that I can kind of see Hayward having more layers than just a mustache twirling villain in regards to, I want to protect the world. These heroes couldn't defeat Thanos. I have to protect the world myself, creating this vision. But they make him, he ultimately just becomes a villain of just without much depth, without much layers. But one can argue, and I'm just thinking of this in my head, essentially he kind of got what he was going out for, which was creating Wanda to be this villain. He almost is like a Baron Zemo of sorts, right? If you think about it this way, where he said many times in this season, she's the villain, she's the terrorist. So he kind of makes Wanda look that way, especially in the eyes of the people from Westview, which we'll talk about them in a bit. So he kind of wins. So there's a little bit of hope for Hayward. But again, majority of this episode was just very traditional villain in of a sense. As we see again, Wu calls in for backup, and again, all that stuff was a little bit underwhelming. But we cut back to Agatha. She reveals that there's a whole chapter devoted to the Scarlet Witch in the Darkhold. So that is a theory that ended up coming true, that we talked about a couple weeks ago, that book that was revealed a couple episodes ago was the Darkhold, which, as Agatha says, is the book of the damned. It has all the darkest, the deepest kind of sadistic and just really menacing spells within this book. As we see, Wanda screams out to her, I am not a witch. No one's trained me. I don't know how to use these witch abilities. And we can even see Agatha trying to, again, this is what I like about the parallels between Agatha and Wanda. They have a lot of similarities, right? We saw that from Agatha's origins, that she had these abilities that she didn't know how to control, that she was using these dark magics, but her mother and her coven weren't training her to use these, to harness these powers. And the same can be looked at as Wanda. She hasn't been taught. She hasn't been learned how to use her abilities, which would explain why they kept Agatha alive, which I love that, which we'll talk a little bit about later. But also, there's a Sorcerer Supreme, as Agatha points out. Even the Sorcerer Supreme is not aware of how to actually use these powers, which obviously speaks to Doctor Strange. And let's just address that elephant in the room, right? Why didn't Doctor Strange make an appearance on this show? Well, number one, it's a pretty big bill to have a big movie star come into a show. He's shooting a movie right now, Doctor Strange 2. He's a very busy man, so there's logistical aspects of that. But again, it's Marvel, it's Disney. They can pay him the big bucks to come on a TV show, right? But just look about it this way. The Sorcerer Supreme, Doctor Stephen Strange, he's been missing for 5 years, which means that the Sorcerer Supreme was vacant for 5 years, right? So he has to deal with that. In the last 5 years, the Infinity Stones are no longer in this world. And as we know, Doctor Strange, the Sorcerer Supreme, protects reality, right? So he's dealing with that. What does a world look like without Infinity Stones, and particularly the Time Stone, which he swore to protect, which we know he gave to Thanos in Infinity War. So he's dealing with that, right? And then just think of it this way. With the Time Stone now out of the equation, remember in his movie, he had Dormammu in a time loop, but now that the Time Stone's gone, doesn't that mean that Dormammu is loose and free and can do whatever he wants now? So I think Doctor Strange is dealing with a lot of stuff right now versus what's going on in this last week or so in Westview, or a little bit more than a week. So that, to me, makes sense why we didn't get that Doctor Strange moment. But we'll talk more about that in the watch along and definitely in the discussion tomorrow. Cut back to Agatha unleashing the hex that everyone's on. We see Dottie, who, we thought Dottie was going to be, another witch of some sorts, but no, she just wants to see her daughters. She asks Wanda, please let me go. I just want to check on my daughters. Your boys can be friends with my daughters if that plays into your storyline. And we see everyone else looking at Wanda as the villain. As again, this show is all about perspective. If I was in Westview and I was been held hostage under my own abilities, I would be upset with this super powered being, aka the Scarlet Witch. So it makes a lot of sense, and this is going to be interesting to see too. The people of Westview, they're not going to forget what happened. So we got to remember, Wanda is still a fugitive based on the events of Civil War. So I think this is planting the seeds for maybe a Civil War 2 in 10 years. But this plants that idea that this world really doesn't believe or trust the superheroes, the Avengers in this world. They lost to Thanos. We have an Avenger who's grieving, who's literally taking over a town. So there's a seed to be planted there that I think is going to carry on to Falcon and Winter Soldier, to Hawkeye potentially, and other series, and of course the movies, that these heroes aren't really heroes in a lot of people's eyes. And Westview, they hate Wanda. So cut back to, we see, this is a disappointment, I'm not going to lie, for me. And it's just because of the narrative that was actually created in the show. We meet Ralph Bohner, the fake Pietro, as we see Monica takes off the spell necklace that he had on, and we get that big moment. To me, I say it's a disappointment because it's not even about the theories. Yes, it would have been cool if he was Peter from the X-Men and he's from another multiverse, and the X-Men makes their way into the all that stuff would have been cool. It didn't happen. Whatever, I'm fine with that. It's just, with me in this show, why cast Evan Peters in the role if you're not going to take advantage of him being an X-Men? Again, it's the show having fun. They're paying homage of a sorts, or as they say, fan service of a sorts, of casting the same person that played Quicksilver in a movie. That's all fun and dandy, but again, it's just like, you could have had someone else entirely in that role. So to me, that Ralph, that is Agatha, who was referring to Ralph the whole time, and it wasn't Mephisto, it wasn't someone else more sinister, Nightmare or whatnot. So that was a disappointment for me, and not even, like I said, not even to the fact that the theories didn't play out. It's just that in the show, narratively, why cast Evan Peters in that role? As I digress, we go back to the townspeople, again, telling Wanda that they've been suffering whenever they dream her nightmares. And this is where nightmares, I don't know if there's a little correlation, again, not to dive too deep into the whole Mephisto balloon being popped, but I've always said that I think the MCU will have Mephisto and Nightmare kind of bring them as one character. And again, we might see that character come to fruition in a Doctor Strange 2. But again, we'll see what happens there. But we see Wanda is overwhelmed by them, telling them, complaining about what she's done, and she essentially kind of goes dark, right? It has a Sith moment, and she's, Darth Vadering everyone, and as they're choking, and she realizes she has to let them go, which we see she inevitably does. She releases the hex. We see Hayward and his sword people coming into the mix, and as we're seeing this going on, Vision's obviously tearing apart. The boys are tearing apart, which I love that little attention to detail as we see them kind of getting pixelated. That's very similar to the comic book cover of House of M, which this was obviously inspired by, which I like that detail. But as we cut to more of Wanda versus Agatha, Vision versus Vision. Again, this is the weakest part of the show, of this episode, I should say, to me, was the underwhelming action. It was just unmotivated action. It reminded me, again, this show is so heavily focused on Age of Ultron. And I like Age of Ultron, but to me, Age of Ultron lacks and just, it throws in too much in the storyline. The action to me of Age of Ultron felt very like the action in this film. just action just to be action, just to have that. And the show wasn't that. That's why I don't like the action in this episode. The show's never given us this level of action. And yes, it's the MCU. We come to expect action, but this is not a movie. This is a TV show with 6 hours worth of character development and story depth and flesh out the characters. And the action to me just felt forced. It felt like it was just like checking off a book of like, checking off a box. Like, okay, we are a superhero show. We are an MCU show. We got to have some action, right? And to me, the action was just lazy. It just looked really weird, very clunky. It was the coordination and seeing Wanda and Agatha. Some of the stuff was cool. Don't get me wrong, but them just flying in the air, it was just a CGI mess, right? And seeing the Vision moment, which, we see Vision eventually. And let me, before we get to that scene, again, Hayward being a traditional villain, I don't even know why he thought this was a good idea. He shoots at the boys, which we see Monica Rambeau, which she was kind of very underwhelming in this finale. She comes in, she absorbs the bullets, which is, her power. She moves as fast as the sound of light. She absorbs the bullets. The boys use their magic, or we see, Wiccan use his magic to kind of bring down the military guys and all that stuff. Again, to me, the action was dumb. It was just unmotivating, underwhelming, and just felt forced. And we see Dorothy, she comes into the mix, which was just underwhelming as well. It was like, what was the point of her even being in the show? That was very a letdown. She hits Hayward with her car, and you're going to be arrested now. Again, all that stuff was just kind of very poorly executed. As we see the Visions having this conversation in the Lionberry, which is an important conversation because I always said that I want more Paul Bettany. Even though he trolled the hell out of us, I love Paul Bettany as an actor. I'm starting to love Vision, or I'm come to like this character, because I'm not going to lie. I told you all in the very first review, I wasn't a Vision fan. I wasn't a fan of Wanda and Vision's love. I thought it was just very, it was rushed, right? It just felt like, hey, we got to do this to have, to represent the comic books. But nonetheless, we see Vision having a discussion about the ship thesis, which is essentially if you take the pieces of someone else, and then build something new, is that new thing the old thing? Is the old thing the new thing? So they have that conversation in which, the White Vision realizes that he's been used as a weapon. We have the Hex Vision, unlock his memories, which he remembers everything, and we see him go off and just go somewhere, right? Which to me, I actually love that moment because Vision has never had control over his entire existence. Jarvis getting transformed by Ultron to become what we know as Vision. We see Vision doesn't have a choice into, picking sides in Civil War, losing his life in Infinity War, being brought back by Wanda and this Hex. So he's never had control over his life. So I like the fact that he's like, you know what, I'm out of here. Let me figure some things out. And I'm excited to see this next iteration of Vision, whether it be Spider-Man 3, Doctor Strange 2, that would be a nice cameo, right? So I'm assuming we're going to see him sooner rather than later, but I like the fact that he could now just live his own life and kind of make his own life and not be controlled by others. As we kind of wrap up this recap here, cut to Wanda tricking Agatha in regards to she brings her back to the stake. As we know, Wanda uses her abilities that we saw in Age of Ultron. The witches come back to life. They're starting to, come back and switch the tables on Wanda and, try to take her out. We see Wanda unbreaks that hex, and we see Agatha to say, just give me your powers, just give them to me. And we see, initially we're thinking, okay, she's convinced her to give her powers, she's draining her life, she's losing her life, yo magic. But no, Wanda has some tricks up her own sleeve, as she has the ruins there, as we know that she used the same thing that Agatha taught her a couple episodes ago, which was very awesome. Again, if you teach Wanda to use these abilities, she can be a very capable superhero. And I just love this moment here as she becomes the Scarlet Witch. That moment there was the best action set piece for me. It looked visually gorgeous. Seeing her in her full outfit was just so on point. The costume was just so awesome. I can't wait to see her wear that in the next movie that we see her in, whether it be, Spider-Man 3 or, of course, with Doctor Strange 2. I thought that moment was just really well executed, and that costume is just so fire. As we see Wanda turns Agatha into the role that she was casted in as the nosy neighbor. Now, let's address that. Now, the hex is broken, and we'll talk about that moment of the hex finally being broken. I am to assume that Agatha, aka the nosy neighbor, is going to stay in Westview and find a place to live, but at the same time, the people of the town know who she is, right? So they're gonna not want a witch in their neighborhood, right? And speaking of witches, this just comes to mind again. This just speaks to the MCU and planting the seeds. The last movie we got in the MCU was Far From Home, and we know, I can't remember the teacher, JB Smoove, the comedian, he says witches quite a few times in Spider-Man Far From Home, where he says, we're going back to the Dark Ages, there's witches out there, so maybe people from Westview have said, hey, there's a witch that lives in our town. There was a witch that took over our town. So it's really interesting to see there. But I'm wondering what's going to happen to Agatha in regards to where she's going to live, where she's going to be if people know that she's a witch. So I love that they didn't kill her, number one. Catherine Hahn, can't wait to see her make her appearance back in the MCU. But I like that they kept her around because comic book accurately speaking, she's a mentor to Wanda. It's going to be obviously a broken kind of relationship, but that happens in the comics as well. So I'm going to really excited to see that friendship maybe blossom into that enemy, frenemy type of situation between Agatha and Wanda. But wrapping things up, the Hex becomes smaller. We see Wanda. This is the best moment of the episode by far. The emotional beats, right? Because this is the narrative of the show. We got to remember this show, put all the theories aside, expectations aside, this was a show about someone grieving and the grieving process, and someone, not just a normal human being, a Scarlet Witch, a superhero, an Avenger grieving, and what that looks like. So this was the best moment, the emotional payoff as the entire 9 episodes led up to. We see Wanda facing her grief. She's been ignoring it her entire life. She suppresses it. She forgets she has power. She puts the death of her family, the death of Vision, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back, right? It's just so much trauma she's dealt with, but she now has to face that trauma. She says the goodbye to the boys. She has her moment with Vision as he has a tear that comes down on his face, which is like literally ripped out of the comic books when Vision actually cries, and seeing a robot cry is like unheard of, right? And we see Wanda says to him, you know, Vision asks, who am I? What am I, right? She says that you were my sadness, you were my loneliness, but you were also, this is a great line, you were also my hope and my love. They kiss. And they say their goodbyes. You know, she says goodbye to her boys, say goodbye to the whole life. The house goes away. The Hex goes away. She puts up the hood. You know, we know Avengers love their secret identities. They put on a hat, they put on a hood, and no one knows who they are. But we see Wanda does the walk of shame through the town. The people are obviously hating on her. They don't like her, which makes a lot of sense. You know, she says her goodbyes to Monica, and it is the end of the episode. But no, we got 2 post-credit scenes. We see Wu is giving orders to help everyone out, but then we also see Hayward getting arrested, which he's still going to be out there. We'll see if we'll see director Hayward in a future MCU project. We see Monica gets called into the theater by a sword agent. It's revealed to be a Skrull, which why wasn't it her friend that was in Captain Marvel, right? Why wasn't it someone she knew, maybe, right? She knows Skrulls. She's grew up with her mom, Marie. So either way, the random Skrull agent tells her he wants to see you and points towards the sky. I'm assuming she's referring to Nick Fury, which would explain Far From Home. He's in space. You know, he's the real director of, you know, Sword moving forward. But that was the first post-credit scene. It was okay. It sets up, you know, Captain Marvel 2 and Monica Rambeau and all that fun stuff. But this was the good one here, right? This is the second post-credit scene. As a show, we sweep in. This was very cinematic, by the way. I love this shot. We sweep in. It's the mountains. We go to Wanda. She's in a cabin. You know, we see that she's, you know, sipping tea. But then the camera pulls out, and we see that she is very similar to Doctor Strange. She goes into goes out of her body and is able, she's reading the Darkhold, learning all the spells, learning all the dark spells of that matter. Especially, she's probably reading that chapter about herself. But we hear the boys, Billy and Tommy, screaming for help. What does that mean? Well, that obviously sets up Doctor Strange 2. It's called Multiverse of Madness. I don't know. Are the boys trapped somewhere in a multiverse, so she has to save them? And that explains Doctor Strange getting into the mix, because she's going to literally maybe rip the fabric of reality to find her boys. Being held by who exactly? Why are they screaming? You know, I don't want to say it, but it starts with the M, you know, Mephisto or Nightmare or someone else even more dangerous, potentially, that they're being trapped by. And Wanda's going to need the help to get her boys from whatever multiverse they are. Again, putting the expectations and theories aside, but based on the MCU taking things from the comics and obviously having the creative liberties to kind of do their own thing, Mephisto was fragments of the boys, so it would, you know, it would make sense if Mephisto and Nightmare, like I'm saying, are going to be one character in the same, would be the big bad in a Doctor Strange 2. But that's just my thoughts. That's just my theories. If it doesn't come true, that's fine. And that's the big thing about this show, right? I already know that people are going to be very disappointed by this because we didn't get a Luke Skywalker reveal. We don't know who the engineer was. You know, who was the witness protection program person. Dottie didn't beat anyone. You know, there was no big bad behind the show. It was Agatha all along and all that stuff. But I am to put that aside, right? Look at the narrative. Look at the show that was given to us. And it's a good show. It's a great show, right? It's all about the grieving process. Yes, it was 9 episodes worth of someone going through the grieving process, but it's something that I enjoyed. It's something that I love the acting. Paul Bettany, Elizabeth Olsen, Catherine Hahn, everyone brought their A game. There were some, moments that we talked about in the weeks that were underwhelming, especially in this finale. But as a whole, as the very first project from the MCU, I'm excited for the rest of these shows, and I'm excited obviously for phase 4 in the movies and seeing these characters that we see in the show and how they're going to handle. It's going to be so interesting for those that don't follow every movie, every show, how the movies are going to explain, this is Monica Rambeau. She got her powers in a TV show. Is the audience going to be able to understand who this character is? Same with WandaVision. When you see her in Doctor Strange 2 or maybe even Spider-Man No Way Home, will there be context of how that character came to be Wanda, how she transformed to the Scarlet Witch? It's going to be really interesting to see those conversations for, just like I said, the average person that doesn't follow all these shows. But I enjoyed this show. I can't wait to talk about it tonight. Can't wait to talk about it tomorrow. Again, we're going to be doing a watch party tonight at 8 p.m. Central Time, myself, Amanda, and Chris. And then tomorrow at 3 p.m., we're going to be having a live discussion with myself, Amanda, Chris, Sharonda, Zach, and Tessa. It's going to be such a great time, and I hope to see you all there. Again, thank you for watching these reviews. Thank you for just supporting the channel as a whole. Make sure if you haven't already, like the video, share the video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and continue the conversation in the comment section. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell. That way you don't miss the live streams, the reviews, and all the fun things we do on this very channel. Hope you all enjoyed this review. Hope you're staying safe, and we'll see you in the next video.